FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
I take it it's a simple question. I'll start with you, Tom, and it's the same question. I take it you think this is a borderline disastrous choice then by John McCain. From everything you've said, you don't see any redeeming features in this pick of Sarah Palin.
I do. I think it is a horrendous choice. It reflects badly on John McCain's judgment, on his decision-making process, raised questions of impulsiveness. I think it's the worst pick since it became important to nominate someone who could assume the responsibilities of the office. I think Dan Quayle, which is roundly criticized, was a much stronger choice. Quayle was a respected member of the Senate. He wasn't flashy or smooth, but he was a good senator. This, in my mind, is a disastrous appointment.
And Norm, with you, I take it you broadly agree with Tom, but is this going to be then one of those rare elections where the vice presidential pick actually matters? Perhaps, for the first time really since 1960 when the vice presidential pick has actually any impact on the outcome of the election?
I think fundamentally people still vote for the presidential candidate and not the vice presidential candidate. And the Quayle pick, which Tom is absolutely right. Dan Quayle had 12 years in the House and Senate. We knew him, and he was, perfectly good senator.
Yeah, he was unfairly
at that
maligned,
point.
wasn't he?
Unfairly maligned, but despite that, people saw him as a lightweight, and in the end, it doesn't override those larger forces. But there are questions here. John McCain built his whole campaign around the idea that there's one thing that trumps everything else combined, and that is the transcendental threat of Islamic fundamentalism. And when you look at your array of choices as a running mate, and you end up picking somebody who got a passport a year ago, has, other than Canada, been out of the country once in her life, has no positions on any of these issues, it raises questions about his judgment more than the choice itself. So that may matter, at least at the margins, a little bit. Now, I also believe that this has some political pluses for him. I believe his speech now is going to be a dramatically different one than it would have been if he picked anybody else. If he picked anybody else, he would have focused on this threat of terrorism. Now, he will mention it, but now his theme is going to be, I'm not George Bush. I'm going back to the commercial I ran. Washington is broken. The last 4 years have left us worse off than we were before. Now I've got two people who will join together to blow up Washington and change things. That will be a popular refrain with the public. Sarah Palin's life story is an appealing one. In the middle of the country, a hockey mom who's raising 5 kids, including one with a serious handicap, is going to have some resonance, although it's going to be interesting to see if somebody with that kind of family life willing to move to 24/7 to run for president, vice president, and be in the White House will create its own issues. But that's a plus for him. He shook up the race at a point where he needed to shake up the race. You come back to that larger question of whether making this choice at this time was done in the right fashion and reflects those larger threats, and that may be an issue. Now, of course, what's also going to happen is every choice has drawbacks. They all have one strike at least against them. Joe Biden had strikes against him. Now, what will be interesting is if McCain can turn what was a losing position on the status quo into a winning position where the 36 years that Joe Biden has had in the Senate becomes a drawback. I'm a little skeptical of that, but there are potential pluses here, but I think a lot more minuses. It was a gamble. He knew it was a gamble. He threw the long ball because he felt that he had to do it. But those things sometimes pay off. David Frum, who's a colleague of mine, we just came from a panel that actually will be on FORA.tv on the future of conservatism. And he said, if somebody takes the rent money, goes to the casino, puts it on black, and wins, you say, that's an awfully lucky guy. You don't say, gee, that was the right decision to make. And that's what we're dealing with here.